My family invited me to dinner just to mock my life. She's a failure, my brother David laughed. Pathetic, my mother Madeline agreed. I walked out, smiled, and made the call that canceled their life-saving investment. They didn't know the investor was me. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Kin and Karma. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The rain was coming down in sheets, the kind of heavy, relentless downpour that made the windshield wipers work overtime just to keep a patch of visibility clear. I sat in my rental car, a modest, gray sedan that smelled faintly of lemon air freshener and stale coffee, staring up at the house I had grown up in. It was a sprawling, colonial-style estate, illuminated by floodlights that cut through the storm. It looked picture-perfect, the kind of home you see on holiday cards, promising warmth and family and safety. But my stomach was twisting into tight, painful knots, a physical reaction I had developed over the last decade whenever I came within 5 miles of this driveway. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. The dark circles under my eyes were genuine, though not for the reasons my family assumed. They thought I was exhausted from the grind of poverty, from the struggle of being a freelancer with no direction, as my father, Nathan, liked to put it. The truth was, I had just flown in from Tokyo after closing a $40 million acquisition for a client who needed discretion above all else. My fatigue was the expensive kind, jet lag from first-class travel and the adrenaline crash of high-stakes negotiation. But I didn't wear my success. I wore a simple, unbranded trench coat and comfortable boots. To the untrained eye, I looked like I was scraping by. To the trained eye, the fabric of my coat was vicuna wool, but my family had never had trained eyes. They only saw flash, logos, and volume. I took a deep breath, killed the engine, and stepped out into the rain. I didn't have an umbrella. I pulled my coat tighter around myself and walked up the long, paved path. The windows of the dining room were cracked open slightly, likely to let out the heat of the fireplace, and the sound of voices drifted out into the wet night air. I stopped. My hand was inches from the heavy brass knocker when I heard my name. Is she actually coming? It was David, my older brother. His voice had that familiar, sneering edge, the sound of a man who needed to put others down to feel tall. I mean, really? I thought she couldn't afford the gas money. I froze. The rain plastered my hair to my forehead, but I didn't move. Oh, she'll come, my mother, Madeline, replied. I could hear the clink of crystal against glass. She was probably nursing her third glass of Chardonnay. She needs the free meal, David. You know how Caroline is. She drifts from one little project to another. It's embarrassing, really. It's pathetic, David scoffed. There was a pause, and I imagined him leaning back in his chair, the golden child who could do no wrong. I saw her shoes last Christmas. Scuffed. Old. I almost offered her $50 just to go away, but I didn't want to insult her pride. Whatever pride a 38-year-old failure can have, anyway. She has no career, no love life. She's a walking failure, Madeline sighed, the sound heavy with theatrical disappointment. I just hope she doesn't ask for a loan tonight. You know, Nathan is already stressed about the merger. Don't worry, Nathan's voice grumbled, deep and dismissive. I won't give her a dime. She needs to learn. She'll never be worth anything until she hits rock bottom. She's already there, Dad, David laughed, a cruel, barking sound. She's been at rock bottom for 10 years. She's just too stupid to realize it. I stood there on the porch, the water dripping off my nose, my hand still hovering near the door. Every word was a precise, calculated strike. They weren't just venting, they were entertaining themselves. My pain, my supposed struggle, was their dinner theater. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I felt 12 years old again, listening to them critique my report card, telling me I wasn't as bright as David, wasn't as charming as David. But then, the cold wind hit my face and the feeling shifted. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. It was a sensation I knew well from the boardroom. It was the feeling of knowing you held all the cards while the other side was still bluffing. I lowered my hand. I didn't knock. "She'll never be worth anything," Nathan had said. I looked at the warm glow of the window, seeing their silhouettes moving inside, comfortable and arrogant. They had no idea who was standing outside their door. They had no idea that the merger Nathan was stressed about and the investor David was bragging about were all tied to the same source. The betrayal of their cruelty didn't break me this time. It calcified me. I stepped back from the door, moving quietly so the gravel wouldn't crunch too loudly under my boots. The rain felt different now, less like a miserable assault and more like a cleansing wash. I walked back to my rental car, not with the slumped shoulders of the defeated daughter they expected, but with the stride of the CEO I was. I sat in the driver's seat, the engine off, the darkness of the car wrapping around me like armor. My hands were shaking, not from cold, but from adrenaline. It was the fight-or-flight response, but I was done flying. I reached into the inner pocket of my coat and pulled out my phone. It was a secure line, encrypted, the only tool I truly needed to run my empire. I swiped the screen and dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang once. Caroline. The voice on the other end was sharp, alert. It was Marcus, my chief of operations. He was in London, which meant it was the middle of the night for him, but Marcus never slept when a deal was in the red zone. "I didn't expect to hear from you until after the family dinner. Everything all right?" "The dinner is canceled," I said, my voice steady, surprisingly calm even to my own ears. "I'm not going in." "Okay," Marcus said slowly, sensing the shift in my tone. "Do you want me to rebook your flight to New York? We can have the jet ready in 2 hours." "No," I said, staring at the front door of my parents' house. I saw the shadow of my brother move across the window. He was probably refilling his drink, celebrating his own magnificence. "Not yet. I have some business to conclude here first." "Understood," regarding the Apex project. Apex was the internal code name for the capital injection David's real estate firm was desperate for. He had been courting a mysterious shell company, Obsidian Holdings, for 6 months. He thought he was dealing with a faceless conglomerate of European investors. He had no idea he was dealing with his little sister. "Yes," I said. "Where are we in the process?" "The contracts are on his desk," Marcus replied. "He's scheduled to sign tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m. Once he signs, the funds, $5 million, transfer immediately to cover his liquidity issues. He's already leveraged his personal assets against it, Caroline. If he doesn't get this money, the bank calls his loans by Friday." I watched the house. I could almost hear David's laughter echoing in my mind. "She's a walking failure." "Pull it," I said. Silence on the other end. Even Marcus, who had seen me dismantle hostile takeovers with a smile, seemed paused by the suddenness. "Pull the deal. Caroline, they've spent months on due diligence. If we pull out the night before signing." "Terminate the offer, Marcus. Send the official notice. Cite alignment issues regarding the board's ethical standards. Send it to his personal email and his work email. Now." "He'll be ruined," Marcus said, his voice neutral, just stating the fact. "He has leveraged everything. The house, the cars, even your parents' equity is tied into the collateral for the bridge loans he took out expecting this cash." "I know," I whispered. "Do it." "Consider it done. Anything else?" "Yes, the audit we ran on his firm during the due diligence phase. The discrepancies we found in the accounts. The embezzlement," Marcus clarified. "The $300,000 he siphoned off to pay for his mistress's condo. We were going to overlook that as part of the restructuring." "Don't overlook it," I said, my eyes narrowing as I watched the front porch light flicker. "Package it. Send the full forensic accounting report to his partners. And copy my father, Nathan, on the email. He's the chairman of the board after all. He should know how his son does business." "Scorched earth," Marcus murmured. "I like it. I'll initiate the protocols immediately. By the time they finish their dessert, their phones will start buzzing." "Thank you, Marcus." I hung up the phone and tossed it onto the passenger seat. I sat there for a moment longer, watching the house. I imagined them inside, cutting into their roast beef, raising toasts to their own success, completely unaware that the failure sitting in the rain outside had just detonated their entire world. They thought I was weak. They thought I was nothing. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. When you treat someone like they are invisible, you give them the superpower of being unseen. And I had seen everything. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway, the tires crunching softly. As I drove away, I didn't look back. The real show wasn't the dinner. The real show was going to be tomorrow morning. To understand why I did what I did, you have to understand the ecosystem of the Holloway family. I was never abused in the way you might see on the news. I was never beaten. I was never starved. I was simply diminished. My father, Nathan, was a man who measured worth in volume. He was a loud man, a man who took up space. He had built a mid-sized construction supply business in the 80s and convinced himself he was a titan of industry. He wasn't. He was a big fish in a very small pond, a man who bullied subcontractors and cut corners to maintain a lifestyle he couldn't quite afford. My mother, Madeline, was his perfect counterpart. She was the curator of the Holloway myth. She spent her days managing appearances, serving on charity boards not because she cared about the causes, but because she wanted her picture in the local paper. To Madeline, children were accessories. And then there was David. David was 5 years older than me, and from the moment he could walk, he was the prince. He was loud like Nathan, charming in a shallow, salesman kind of way, and utterly devoid of a moral compass. Growing up, if David broke a window, it was high spirits. If I dropped a plate, I was clumsy and careless. If David got a C in math, the teacher was incompetent. If I got an A, it was expected and barely acknowledged. I spent my 20s trying to buy their love with achievements. I went to a top university on a full scholarship. When I told them, Nathan just grunted and asked why I didn't go to the state school where David had pledged his fraternity. I graduated with honors. They didn't come to the ceremony because David had a minor crisis with a girlfriend that required their full attention. That was the turning point. At 22, I realized that no matter what I did, I would never be David. I would never be enough. So I stopped trying to be their daughter and started trying to be myself. I moved to the city. I started my first company, a small consultancy firm for crisis management. I was good at it. I was good at seeing patterns, at predicting fallouts. I was good at cleaning up messes because I had spent my whole life navigating the mess of my family's emotions. By 30, I had sold that firm for 7 figures. By 35, I had founded Obsidian. But I never told them. Why? Because I knew them. If I had told Nathan I was a millionaire, he would have demanded I invest in his failing projects. If I had told Madeline, she would have criticized my clothes, my house, my choices, all while spending my money. If I had told David, he would have tried to exploit me. So, I created a persona. When I visited, I wore old clothes. I talked vaguely about freelance writing and struggling with rent. I let them believe I was the failure they needed me to be. It made them feel superior. It made them feel safe. And it gave me a front row seat to their rot. David had taken over the family business 5 years ago, or rather, Nathan had handed it to him. Since then, it had been a slow-motion car crash. David had pivoted from supply to high-end development. He wanted to be a real estate mogul. He bought land he couldn't develop. He hired contractors he couldn't pay. He leased a Porsche 911 he couldn't afford and wore a fake Rolex that he claimed was a vintage heirloom. He was drowning. I knew this because Obsidian's analysts had been tracking him. 3 months ago, David had approached a broker looking for a miracle. He needed $5 million to finish a luxury condo complex that was currently just a muddy hole in the ground. Without the cash, the bank would foreclose on the land. And because Nathan had co-signed the loans, the foreclosure would wipe out my parents' retirement fund and their house. They were all standing on the edge of a cliff, holding hands, and David was about to jump, pulling them all down with him. The broker he found was one of mine. I had set the trap carefully. I had authorized the creation of a shell company, Obsidian Holdings, specifically to entertain David's proposal. We had strung him along for weeks, asking for more documents, more audits, forcing him to reveal every dirty secret of the business. We found everything: the falsified invoices, the tax evasion, and the most damning piece of all, the embezzlement. David wasn't just bad at business. He was stealing from the company accounts, draining what little liquidity they had to fund a secret life. The man I had seen through the window, laughing at my poverty, was a criminal. The antagonist of my life wasn't just a mean brother. He was a parasite who was about to destroy my parents, and they were cheering him on while he did it. They thought the investor was their savior. They had spent the last week pre-spending the money. Madeline had been bragging to her friends about David's international partners. Nathan had been looking at vacation homes in Florida. They had no idea that the partner was the daughter they had just mocked for being worthless. I sat in my hotel room that night, staring at the rain against the glass. I had pulled the trigger. The deal was dead. The emails were sent. Tomorrow, the laughter would stop. The next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving behind a sky the color of a bruise, a mottled gray and purple that promised nothing but cold. I woke up early in my hotel room, a suite I had booked under a corporate alias, M. Reeves, to avoid any accidental run-ins. The bed was enormous, the sheets crisp and expensive, a stark contrast to the futon I pretended to sleep on when I visited my parents. I ordered coffee, black, and opened my laptop. It was 7:00 a.m. The first email from Marcus was already waiting. Subject: deployment confirmed. I clicked it open. Attached were the timestamps. At 10:15 p.m. last night, while my family was likely just finishing their dessert and moving on to brandy, the termination notice had hit David's inbox. At 10:17 p.m., the forensic accounting report detailing the embezzlement had been sent to the board members of Holloway Construction, which included my father, Nathan, and two silent partners who had been friends with him since the 80s. I took a sip of coffee, the warmth spreading through my chest. The trap was sprung. Now I just had to watch it close. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was my mother. I let it ring. Once. Twice. Then I picked up, keeping my voice groggy, as if I had just woken up in a cheap motel. Hello. Caroline. Madeline's voice was shrill, laced with a panic I had never heard before. Where are you? Are you still in town? I'm just waking up, Mom. What's wrong? It's David. It's the business. You need to come over now. Mom, I have a flight. Cancel it, she shrieked. Your father he's having chest pains. David is screaming, it's a madhouse. We need family, just get here. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. We need family. The irony was almost suffocating. Last night, I wasn't family enough to be invited to dinner. Today, when the walls were crumbling, I was summoned like a servant. But this was part of the plan. I needed to be there. I needed to witness the fallout to ensure the damage was total. I dressed slowly, choosing my outfit with deliberate care. I put on the same worn jeans and scuffed boots I had worn the day before, but underneath my coat, I wore a silk blouse from a designer label they wouldn't recognize, but that cost more than David's car payments. It was a subtle armor. I drove to the house. The driveway was crowded. David's Porsche was parked haphazardly on the lawn, leaving deep tire tracks in the wet grass. My father's truck was there, too, the driver's side door left open. I walked up the steps, my heart pounding a steady, calm rhythm. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house smelled of stale alcohol and fear. I told you, it's a mistake. David's voice was booming from the study. It has to be a glitch in their system. They wouldn't pull out the night before signing. We have a verbal agreement. A verbal agreement means nothing, you idiot. That was Nathan. His voice was raw, a guttural roar I hadn't heard since I was a teenager. Read the email, David. Ethical concerns regarding leadership integrity. What did you do? I walked into the hallway. The study door was open. David was pacing, his face flushed a deep, unhealthy red. He was still wearing his suit trousers from last night, but his shirt was unbuttoned, his tie gone. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. Nathan was sitting behind his massive oak desk, his head in his hands. Madeline was standing by the window, wringing her hands, her face pale. I didn't do anything. David shouted, slamming his hand on the desk. They're lying. They're trying to leverage a better deal. It's a negotiation tactic. I'll call them. I'll fix this. You can't call them, Nathan growled, looking up. His eyes were bloodshot. They blocked our numbers. The legal department sent a cease and desist with the termination. And what is this? This report. He gestured to a stack of papers on the desk. The forensic audit. That's garbage. David spat. It's fabricated. Someone is trying to sabotage me, probably one of the contractors I fired. I stepped into the doorway. Is everything okay? They all froze. For a second, the silence was absolute. Then Madeline rushed towards me. Oh, Caroline, thank God, it's a disaster. The investors, they pulled out. David says it's a mistake, but... Who pulled out? I asked, feigning ignorance. Obsidian Holdings, David snapped, not even looking at me. The firm from Zurich, you wouldn't know them. They're big players. This is way over your head, Caroline. Go make some coffee or something. I didn't move. Obsidian Holdings, that sounds serious. It's $5 million, you stupid girl. Nathan yelled, slamming his fist on the desk. It's the whole company. Without that money, the bank takes the equipment on Monday. They take the house. Why did they pull out? I asked quietly. Because they're snakes. David shouted. They let us on. They saw the potential and got scared, or they found a cheaper deal. It's business. You wouldn't understand business if it hit you in the face. Actually, I said, my voice hardening just a fraction. I might understand more than you think. David turned to me, his eyes narrowing. What is that supposed to mean? Don't start with your, I read a blog post about finance garbage. We don't have time for your little fantasies. I mean, I said, stepping fully into the room, that Obsidian Holdings doesn't make mistakes, and they don't pull out unless they find something. Rot. Get out, David hissed. Get out of my sight. No, I said. I'm staying, because I think there's something you're not telling Dad. What? Nathan looked between us. What does she know? I looked at the stack of papers on the desk. The report, Dad, the one you were just asking about, have you read page 7? The section on unverified withdrawals. David's face went from red to white in an instant. Shut up, Caroline. You don't know what you're talking about. I think I do, I said. $300,000 withdrawn over 18 months, labeled as consulting fees to a shell company registered to an address in the Cayman Islands. An address that happens to match the one on your mistress' Instagram posts from last summer. The room went deadly silent. What did you say? Nathan whispered. He stood up slowly, using the desk for support. David stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. How? How do you know that? It's in the public record if you know where to look, I lied smoothly. Or rather, it's in the audit Obsidian sent you. You just didn't read the footnotes. Mistress, Madeline gasped. David, you're married. Rebecca is pregnant. She's lying. David screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. She's jealous. She's always been jealous of me. She's making this up to kick me when I'm down. I walked over to the desk and picked up the report. I flipped to page 7. Here, recipient, Azure Consulting Limited. Signatory, David J. Holloway. And here, the transfer dates match the dates you were supposedly at those conferences in Miami. I tossed the paper down in front of Nathan. My father looked at the paper, then at his son. You stole from the company, from my company. I didn't steal it, David pleaded, his voice cracking. I borrowed it. I was going to pay it back once the condo pre-sales hit. It was a liquidity bridge. Everyone does it. A liquidity bridge to a Cayman account. I asked dryly, for a woman who isn't your wife. You shut your mouth. David lunged at me, his hand raised. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I just looked him in the eye, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear there. He stopped, his hand hovering in the air. Touch me, I said softly, and you'll lose a lot more than your business. He lowered his hand, breathing hard. Who are you? He whispered. You're not Caroline. I'm exactly who you made me, I said. But that's not the point, is it? The point is, Obsidian knows. That's why they pulled the deal. They don't partner with embezzlers. I can fix it. David turned back to Nathan. Dad, listen. We can explain it. We can say it was an accounting error. We can reclassify the funds if we just get them back on the phone. They won't take your call, I said. How do you know? Nathan asked, his voice trembling. He looked old suddenly, deflated. Because, I said, taking a step back towards the door. I know how firms like that operate. They value integrity. And you, David, you have none. We're ruined, Madeline sobbed, sinking into a chair. The house, my friends, everything. Not necessarily, I said. They all looked at me. There might be a way, I said slowly. A way to salvage the company, but not with David in charge. What are you talking about? Nathan asked. I have contacts, I said. People in finance. I might be able to get a meeting, a reconsideration, but only if the ethical concerns are removed. You, David scoffed, though the laugh was weak. You have contacts. Who? The manager at the coffee shop. I can make a call, I said, ignoring him. But the condition will be simple. David steps down, immediately, and he pays back every cent he stole. I can't, David cried. I don't have it, it's gone. Then you sell your house, I said. You sell the Porsche, you liquidate your assets, or you go to jail. Because if Obsidian reports this to the SEC, it's federal fraud, David. She's right, Nathan said. His voice was cold. She's right. Dad, David looked betrayed. You're listening to her, the failure. She's the only one offering a lifeline. Nathan yelled. And you thief, you stole from me. I'll make the call, I said, pulling out my phone. But I need a decision, now. The room was heavy with a silence so thick it felt like physical pressure. Nathan stared at his son, seeing him clearly for the first time in decades. The golden boy was tarnished, covered in the grime of his own greed. Do it, Nathan said, his voice a rasp. Call them. Dad, no, David protested, grabbing his arm. You can't let her take over. She's a nobody. She's bluffing. I'm not taking over, I said calmly. I'm just the messenger, and I'm not bluffing. I dialed Marcus's number again, putting it on speaker but keeping the volume low. Yes, Marcus answered. He sounded professional, detached. I'm with the board of Holloway Construction, I said, my voice shifting into a slightly more formal register. They are aware of the discrepancies. They are prepared to take immediate corrective action. If the CEO is removed effective immediately and full restitution is made, would Obsidian reconsider the partnership? There was a pause. Marcus, playing his part perfectly, let the silence stretch. That would depend, Marcus said. The breach of trust was significant. Who would be the interim leadership? I looked at Nathan. He looked lost. Nathan Holloway will resume full control, I said, with oversight from an external auditor appointed by your firm. And the funds, Marcus asked. The misappropriated $300,000 will be returned within 48 hours, I said, looking at David. Liquidated from personal assets. David looked like he was going to vomit. Very well, Marcus said. If we receive a formal resolution from the board within the hour confirming the CEO's termination and the repayment schedule, we will. Pause the cancellation. We will not commit to funding yet, but we will reopen the file. Thank you, I said and hung up. I looked at them. You have 1 hour. This is insane, David muttered, pacing again. I can't sell the house in an hour. Rebecca will kill me. Then draft a promissory note, I said. Sign over your equity in the company to Dad. Use that as collateral, but you have to resign. Now. Nathan walked behind his desk. He opened a drawer and pulled out a fresh sheet of letterhead. He picked up a pen. Write it, he said to David. I, David Holloway, hereby resign as CEO. Dad, please, David begged. Tears were streaming down his face now. Don't do this. She's manipulating you. Look at her. She's enjoying this. I am not enjoying this, I said, and for a moment it was true. It was tragic. I am saving your parents from being homeless because of your greed. Write it, Nathan roared. David took the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He scribbled the words, his signature a jagged scrawl. And the confession, I added, regarding the funds, so we have it for the auditors. David froze. No, if I write that down, you can use it to send me to prison. If you don't write it down, I said, the deal is dead, the bank forecloses on Monday, and the auditors will find it anyway. This is your only chance to keep it. Internal. It was a lie, of course. Obsidian wasn't going to reinvest, but I needed the confession. I needed it in writing to ensure he could never, ever come back. David wrote it. I admit to the unauthorized withdrawal of $300,000. When he finished, he threw the pen across the room. There, are you happy? You won, the failure won. I haven't won anything, I said, picking up the paper. I just stopped you from losing everything for everyone else. Get out, David said. Take your little victory and get out. I'm not leaving yet, I said. We still have to send this to the partners. And then, we have to tell Rebecca. David's face went white. No, you can't tell her. She's your wife, David, Madeline said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was weak. She has a right to know why you're selling the house. She'll leave me, David screamed. She probably should, I said. Suddenly, the front door opened. We heard footsteps in the hall. Hello, a cheerful voice called out. I brought muffins. I thought we could celebrate the big deal. It was Rebecca, David's wife, pregnant, glowing, and completely oblivious. She walked into the study holding a basket. She stopped when she saw the tension in the room. She saw David's tear-streaked face, Nathan's slumped posture, and me standing there with a piece of paper. What's going on? She asked, her smile faltering. Did something happen with the investor? David looked at me, his eyes pleading. Don't do it, please. I looked at Rebecca. She was a good woman. She had always been kind to me, even when the rest of them weren't. She didn't deserve this, but she deserved the truth. Rebecca, I said gently, you might want to sit down. David, she looked at her husband. What is it? David couldn't speak. He just looked at the floor. David has resigned from the company, I said. There were irregularities with the finances. Irregularities, Rebecca frowned. What kind of irregularities? He stole money, Rebecca, Nathan said, his voice flat. He stole $300,000. Rebecca dropped the basket. Muffins rolled across the floor. That's impossible, David. And, I continued, he spent it on a woman named Alina, in Miami. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard. The basket lay on its side, blueberry muffins scattered across the polished hardwood like debris from a crash. Rebecca stared at me, her eyes wide, unblinking. It was the look of a person whose reality had just shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces, and her brain was refusing to process the image. Elena, she whispered, the name sounding foreign and poisonous on her tongue. Who is Elena? David finally found his voice, though it was strangled and thin. Beck, please, let me explain. It's not what it sounds like. It was a mistake. A long time ago. A mistake, I interjected, my voice cool and sharp. I wasn't going to let him spin this. Not now. The last transfer was 3 weeks ago, David. Consulting fees for a trip you claimed was a site visit in Key West. Rebecca turned to him slowly, her movements stiff, robotic. Key West. You said you were meeting with the concrete suppliers. I was. David pleaded, taking a step toward her. I was working. The money was just, it was complicated. I was trying to leverage some private equity, and I needed to show liquidity. Stop lying, Nathan barked from behind the desk. He looked aged, defeated, but his anger at being made a fool was finally overtaking his pride. The audit shows the money went to a condo rental and a jewelry store, David. A diamond bracelet. Did Rebecca get a diamond bracelet 3 weeks ago? Rebecca's hand went instinctively to her bare wrist. She looked down at it, then back at David. The realization was dawning on her face. The late nights, the stress that kept him at the office, the sudden defensiveness about his phone. "You spent $300,000, she said, her voice trembling, on her, while we were talking about cutting back for the baby, while you told me we couldn't afford the nursery furniture I wanted. I was going to put it back." David yelled, tears streaming down his face now, a grotesque mix of panic and self-pity. "Once the Obsidian deal went through, I was going to replace it all. No one would have known. It was a loan." From my retirement, Madeline shrieked suddenly, finding her voice. She stood up, her face blotchy and red. "You stole from us, from your father and me. We trusted you with everything." "I did it for the family," David roared back, cornered and desperate. "To keep up appearances. You always wanted me to be the big shot, Mom. You pushed me to take the CEO role. You wanted the country club membership and the new cars. I did it to keep your lifestyle afloat. Don't you dare blame me for your whoring." Madeline screamed, rushing at him. She slapped him across the face, a sharp crack that echoed in the silent room. David stumbled back, holding his cheek. He looked at me with pure venom. "This is your fault," he hissed. "You did this. You came here to destroy us because you're jealous. You're a miserable, lonely failure, and you wanted to drag us down with you." I stood my ground, watching the chaos unfold. This was the family that had called me worthless. This was the brother who had mocked my shoes. They were tearing each other apart over money and lies, revealing the rot at their core. "I didn't do this, David," I said calmly. "You did. I just turned on the lights." "Get out," he screamed. "Get out of my house." "It's not your house anymore," I reminded him. "You just signed it over to Dad as collateral, remember." He froze. The reality of the document he had signed in panic hit him. "And as for the Obsidian deal," I continued, deciding it was time for the final blow. I walked over to the desk and picked up my phone. "You can stop waiting for that call." "What?" Nathan asked, looking up. You said you could fix it." "I said I could make a call," I corrected. "I didn't say I would ask them to invest. I am the investor, Dad." The room went silent again. Even Rebecca stopped crying to look at me. "What?" David whispered. "Obsidian Holdings isn't a Swiss conglomerate," I said. "It's my firm. I founded it 6 years ago. I am the CEO. I am the one who approved the due diligence. I am the one who hired the forensic accountants. And I am the one who decided not to give you a single cent." You're lying," David stammered. "You're a freelancer, you're broke." "I have a net worth of over $40 million, I said, my voice steady and devoid of arrogance, just stating facts. "I own 3 companies. I sit on the board of 2 charities that Mom only dreams of getting invited to. And the reason I never told you is because I knew exactly what you would do." I looked at Madeline. "You would have treated me like a bank." I looked at Nathan. "You would have tried to control it." I looked at David, and you would have tried to steal it. "So," I finished, "I became the failure you needed me to be, until you became a threat to the only people I actually care about protecting your victims." I turned to Rebecca. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but the forensic report is in your email. My team sent it to you 5 minutes ago. You'll need it for the divorce lawyer. I've also taken the liberty of paying the retainer for one of the best firms in the city. They're expecting your call." Rebecca looked at me, stunned, tears still wet on her cheeks. You did that for me. You were the only one who ever asked me how my day was," I said softly. "You deserve better." David lunged. It was a desperate, animalistic move. He came at me with his fists raised, screaming something unintelligible. But Nathan was faster. The old man, energized by fury and betrayal, stepped in front of me and shoved his son back. Hard, David stumbled over the muffin basket and fell onto the floor. "Don't you touch her," Nathan growled, standing over him. "She's twice the man you are." David lay there, panting, looking up at his father, his mother, his wife, and me. He was alone, truly, completely alone. The next few hours were a blur of logistics and tears, but for once I wasn't the one crying. Rebecca left first. She packed a bag, took the keys to her own car, the one David hadn't leased, and drove to her sister's house. She hugged me before she left, holding on tight. "Thank you," she whispered. "It hurts, but thank you for saving me from a lie." David was escorted out by Nathan. My father, in a moment of grim efficiency, had called the company's security team to retrieve the company car and laptop. David left on foot, walking down the driveway in his expensive suit, shouting obscenities that the wind carried away. I stayed behind with my parents for a little while. We sat in the living room, the silence heavy but different now. It wasn't the silence of judgment, it was the silence of shame. "Caroline," Madeline started, her voice trembling. She looked small, stripped of her pretenses. "We didn't know about your success. Why didn't you tell us?" "Would it have mattered?" I asked, looking at her. "Would you have loved me more, or would you just have loved what I could give you?" She looked down at her hands. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. "I'm leaving now," I said, standing up. "I have a flight back to Tokyo in 3 hours." "Wait," Nathan said. He stood up, looking uncomfortable. "About the company, with David gone, we're in trouble. The debt." "I know," I said. "The $5 million hole is still there." Is there any chance?" he asked, hope flickering in his eyes. "Since it's your money, could we work something out, a loan? I could give you equity." I looked at him. Even now, after everything, the instinct was to ask, to take. "No," I said firmly. "Obsidian doesn't invest in failing businesses with bad leadership. And frankly, Dad, you let this happen. You watched him spend money he didn't have and cheered him on." He flinched, but, I added, "I have purchased the debt from the bank." "What?" "I bought the loans this morning," I said. "I am now your primary creditor. You won't be foreclosed on next week. You have 6 months. Sell the heavy equipment. Downsize the operations. Sell this house if you have to. Pay me back. If you do that, you can retire with some dignity. If you don't, I will foreclose. And I won't hesitate." Nathan stared at me. It wasn't charity, it was business. And for the first time, he respected me. "Understood," he said, nodding slowly. "Thank you, Caroline." I walked to the door. "Caroline," Madeline called out. Will we see you for Christmas?" I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. I thought about the years of snide comments, the lonely holidays, the feeling of being an outsider in my own home. "I don't think so," I said without turning around. "I think I'll be busy. I have a company to run." I walked out into the cool, clean air. The rain had stopped completely, and the sun was breaking through the clouds. My rental car was waiting. I got in, started the engine, and drove away. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening inside, the reckoning of a lifetime. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. "Board resolution received. David is out. Rebecca's lawyer has been briefed. The acquisition of the debt is complete." "Well done, boss," I smiled. It wasn't a smile of vengeance, really. It was a smile of freedom. I had finally stopped trying to be their daughter and fully embraced being myself. And for the first time in 38 years, I wasn't the one paying the price.